Hi everyone. Thank you for that. I'm going to talk about the Ministry of Justice and the MOJ design system. But first, I just want to give you a brief introduction in general to the Ministry of Justice. So the Ministry of Justice is the second largest of the 25 ministerial departments. We're second to DWP, or the Department for Work and Pensions. So we have about 77,000 staff. A lot of those staff are in sort of the probation or prison staff, things like that. So it's quite a large department and across the whole country. So we are in charge of the administration of justice. So this is what we are responsible for. And predominantly that means we are responsible for things like courts and tribunals, prisons, probation and legal aid, things like that. So what is our mission at the Ministry of Justice? It is to provide justice for all, and it is about making sure that the legal system is accessible to all. So what kinds of services do we do at the Ministry of Justice? Well, we provide things like applying for divorce. So having an online application like this has been really beneficial in reducing the burden on needing solicitors, for example. We also have services like being able to visit someone in prison. So previously, people who are already in quite a stressful situation, so friends and family members that want to visit someone who's in prison, they would have to literally fax things in or post things into the prison staff, and it would take quite a lengthy amount of time just to be able to book in a visit. And now it's just as easy as booking an EasyJet flight, which is fantastic. So we're easing stress out of what is already stressful situations. We can't take away the fact that it's a stressful situation, but we can make it less stressful or as easy as possible for them to do what they need to do. And also another example is checking when a caution or a conviction is spent. So it's about bringing people's data back into the ownership of themselves. So rather than this data being held in government and something you can't access yourself, you are actually able to own that data and know more about what's going on with yourself so that you can make better decisions and feel like you have more control over your life. Systems like this. We also have services for sort of professional users or court staff and things like that. So it's not just about public-facing services and services for members of the public. We also have things like this where we have case lists, things for court staff to be able to deal with a large amount of data. And you'll find that these kinds of patterns are actually solutions to common problems. So these kinds of services, they will have within them common solutions that can go across a variety of services. So there's a benefit to actually sharing these solutions. It can do things like reduce duplication in teams. So instead of reinventing the wheel every time, you're able to actually take what is already been designed and tested and put online. And also other benefits, like you can focus on real challenges. So instead of having to look at what the best way of providing a form field or a button or some kind of transaction, you can focus on something that's very specific to that service itself and really look into what that specific user group needs. And also it maximizes consistency for users, because inconsistent experiences can have real serious effects on the public. So making sure that if they're going to one government service and then going to another government service, you want them to feel like there is no difference between, there is just one government. They don't need to know if one thing they're doing is HMRC and another thing is the Home Office and another thing is Ministry of Justice. They just need to be able to get done what they're trying to do. So, that being said, how do we share solutions across government? So we know that we have all of these services and we know that there's a lot of common solutions in those services. So how can we best share those? So slightly stealing Tim's thunder, because he will be talking about the Gov.uk design system later, but this is the way to solve the problem is that GDS have created the Gov.uk design system. So they published this about a year and a half ago. And this design system includes things like styles, reusable components and patterns. And these are things that all of the departments in government would turn to this and would use this to be able to design our services and come up with the best solutions. And Tim can go into more detail in that. So we also have found that departments have created their own design systems, and you might be wondering why that is. So it's potentially because GDS are most likely inundated with these kinds of requests from all of the government departments. There's a lot of work that's being done out there. So there's a lot of requests and a lot of questions that would come up. And there is just a single team here that is dealing with that, which is a huge product. So you can see that departments would then want a quick way to share solutions to common problems and not necessarily have like a bottleneck to that. So it's a good intention to be able to then create independent design systems per department. But the problem with that is that there's been some more long-term issues that have happened to the short-term benefits that have come out of these independent departments having their own design systems. And the reason for that is that designers don't just look within their department, they also look across other departments and across government. So this is what we have now. So we have a lot of design systems across government. Some of them are maintained, some of them aren't, but you won't be able to tell that. And some of them have various levels of maturity. So we've got a bit of a situation here where there is a little bit of confusion. So an important point is this is the responsibility for the whole of government. So in speaking to senior management at MOJ about this situation and this issue and how we could potentially solve it, sometimes I get sort of the feeling that they sort of say, well, isn't this GDS's problem? Why aren't they putting things up online? Why aren't they adding stuff to the Gov.uk design system? So it's really important to remember that it is actually the responsibility for all of government, not for GDS to fix this problem. They can't do it all. They don't necessarily have the capacity. And also the individual departments have the subject matter expert knowledge that they can actually use to support GDS in being able to provide this information. So we should all be working together to be able to solve this problem. So I joined MOJ last November, and what I wanted to do, so I sort of saw that this was happening and it was a common thing that was happening across departments, not just MOJ. So I wanted to conduct some research to find out what people within MOJ's current experience and expectations were of both the MOJ design system and the Gov.uk design system, and all of those ones I just showed in the picture. So I spoke to about 21 people in MOJ, and it was a mixture of different disciplines, different levels of experience, and also different geographies, because we have different design teams across the country as well. Predominantly we're in London, but we also have, for example, the Prison and Probation Service have a digital team in Sheffield. So I went and visited them for 3 days and spoke to different people there as well. So this is some of the findings that I got from those visits and that research. So one thing was that designers were saying that they were finding it difficult to find if something exists. So if there's a solution that they want for their particular service they're working on, they can't just go to one place now to see if that exists, and if it doesn't, create something and test it. They now have to keep sort of individual lists of all of these design systems. And the issue with that as well is there's no logic at the moment as to what should live where. So you can have different components and patterns across all these departments, but there's no kind of rule as to where a certain thing should live. And also no hierarchy between them. So this is an example of the Gov.uk design system and the MOJ design system. And as you can see, they look very similar. And there's clear reasons why you want to do that. You want to maintain credibility. You want to make sure that there is the level of authority and that people know that this is the place to go for the right kinds of components and patterns. But the issues come out from the designers is that therefore there's no kind of hierarchy. They don't understand the difference between the two. They don't know, why certain things maybe live in a department design system versus the Gov.uk design system. So other kind of issues were around feeling London-centric or not relevant. So there's a real challenge when it comes to design systems for such a wide audience compared to maybe a small private sector design system. When it comes to government, you've really got this challenge of trying to get ownership across the whole country. I think that's a really difficult thing to do. And also people found the contributing process unclear. So how do they get involved in actually being able to add new components and patterns to the design system? They may not know how to, or they may feel a bit intimidated to do so as well. It could also come down to technical knowledge, things like that. Other issues are around the design system looking like gospel. So some people felt that it looked too finished or that solutions look like gospel. So rather than being able to test components, find out that maybe something would work slightly better, what we would want is for them to come back to the design system and say, hey, this can be improved. But there's something around either the way it looks or something to do with the processes that means people are taking these components and patterns and making variations but not actually pushing them back. So we end up having a design system that's not really doing its job because it's not reducing duplication. So how do we solve this problem? So it's not just for MOJ, it's for all departments, like I said. And there is some solutions or some recommendations that I've got. We haven't actually acted on any of these yet, and they are kind of hypotheses. But this is the exciting thing, is we have sort of some actions we could take to try and solve this issue. So one thing is defining the purpose. So what's the purpose of the Gov.uk design system versus the department design systems, making that clearer and making those rules there. So potentially what we could do is move any of the components or the things which are agnostic or the building blocks to Gov.uk, which would be a very big task. But it's then able, it lets us focus on context-specific patterns, which are things which take those building blocks and apply them to something that is specific to that department. So it could be about certain kinds of case lists, or it could be how prison people who are in prison can navigate using laptops where we've got prison hubs. They may have very specific needs, which is different to the wider country, or how legal staff and legal language should be used within the courts and tribunals. So there's kind of specific things to a department which we could actually share across the department, but these kinds of more agnostic components or building blocks, like what's a button look like or what's a form field look like, then don't necessarily need to live within a certain department. So this is just a drawing which illustrates that, which I did at the end of the year when I was thinking about this. So like I said, users currently don't know whether a component exists. So this is interaction designers in particular said this, and they have to look through all the design systems to find out if something exists. So the potential solution, so this hasn't yet been tested, but it's a hypothesis, is that if components only live in gov.uk, then you can have context-specific patterns within each department and potentially call them something like pattern libraries, so you have just one design system. I think the issue could potentially also be the language and the fact that we have several design systems. Again, that's just a hypothesis. So also a way to potentially solve this problem is to define processes. So we also need to figure out what is the contribution process to the MOJ design system, what's the assurance process. Should we be working closely with GDS and aligning on these processes as well? How is the backlog prioritised? So we have a backlog where people can add in the need for new components or new patterns or variations. And how do we decide if a new thing is needed? Sometimes it's not always about needing a new thing, it's about reframing the problem and using what's already there. So it's maybe working within the design community and MOJ on that as well. And another idea is to make the design system more contributable. So again, completely just a hypothesis. But at the moment, like I said, people feel like it's very finished or like gospel. Is there a way maybe stripping out some of the look and feel, or even just changing the hierarchy of it to make it not look like a mirror of Gov.uk's design system? Is there a way to make it look more like something that is iterative and not necessarily the finished and perfect way of a certain thing, of a certain component? And lastly, we also want to look at embedding within the community. So ways of empowering people and trying to encourage that ownership is things like monthly themes for contribution has come up a lot. And this is something that actually Tim Paul mentioned in a previous talk was, what about posting sort of themes and saying this month we are going to be looking at dashboards, or we're going to be looking at case lists, and allowing all of the designers in their teams to be able to pull out all their dashboards and case lists on their existing projects, and then coming together and having a crit where we can get together and come up with what would be the best solution to the common problem. So being able to take anything out that would be bespoke to that particular service, but it would allow us to publish something, which means that we can then not have to reinvent the wheel every time after that. And also introducing training, so things like the backlog itself is currently on GitHub, and a lot of people, particularly designers, feel a bit uncomfortable about using GitHub, so it's about providing training for things like that to encourage more contribution and ability to feedback as well. So this is a huge opportunity, I think. It's improving how we share solutions across the Ministry of Justice, and if we do that, we can build better services, which is a really important thing, and basically the main thing that we need to be focusing on. Also bringing together teams and disciplines. So there's an opportunity where design systems can do more than just provide solutions to common problems. They can also do things like bring together designers, interaction designers and content designers, and also bring together people across different geographies. So for example, some of the developers in the prisoner and probation service who are housed in London and some who are housed in Sheffield. If they're working on something like this, which is across not just a single product or a single project they're working on, it can actually increase cohesion for the whole department. And the other benefit is we could potentially solve the problem for government. So if we are able to make any of these changes, or if any of these hypotheses work, and we can iterate and improve on these things to make it clearer, to reduce the confusion, to empower people or get people more involved, we can actually lead the way for other departments, so then they don't have to try and figure these things out independently. Like I said, there's a lot of design systems at the moment across government. So we need someone to sort of try and make these changes, to try and iteratively improve it, and then communicate that with the other departments to be able to get on track for everyone. And that's it for me. Thank you.